Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Walk Nation. And today, me and my co host Noon will be talking about the issue of cognitive dissidence. Cognitive dissidence, specifically in relation to Islam and our communities.
Mhm.
Um, and when we're talking about cognitive dissidence, we have to define it first. And cognitive dissidence, in its essence, is where you hold a contradiction between a belief or a thought and the behavior you exhibit. By example, you know drinking is unhealthy, yet you still drink. So it's a
Mhm.
contradiction within you, knowing A but doing B. And I think cognitive dissonance cognitive dissonance is something that is in human nature, right? Like all of us have
Mhm.
like certain behaviors that we know are not good for us, right?
Right.
But what makes in cognitive dissonance in a religious sense and in an Islamic sense interesting is that it's a necessity. Like
Right.
you cannot stay a faithful Muslim without some level of cognitive dissonance. Okay, I should probably reframe that. You can stay a faithful Muslim, but if you're Muslim with
Mhm.
just a little bit of empathy, with
Right.
just a smidge of empathy and little bit of understanding of the world, you can't stay Muslim if you don't have some level of cognitive dissonance. Like the hardcore ones take the whole thing in one go. They're probably
Right.
not that affected by it. Like they're like, yeah, this is how the country is. But pretty much everybody else, they have to have some level of cognitive dissonance. And I think
To get by.
it's always been necessary for religion because obviously people can, for example, even the whole problem of the problem of suffering, right? The problem of evil, right? That
Mhm.
is an example of something where religion had to come with an explanation, so people didn't stand, so people weren't in cognitive dissonance because they hear about this God who's all loving, who's all merciful, and then they see a world that is anything but loving and merciful. So that's actually an early
Mhm.
example of theologians trying to remove cognitive dissonance in people when they
Okay.
can see a
Yep.
contradiction between what they're told to behave after and the world as it is.
Mhm.
What's interesting now, right? Like we live in a modern age. We live in an age where technology is flourishing. You can contact everybody anywhere. You have access to pretty much anybody. That's like we have a whole phenomenon of parasocial relationship, right? Like you can get so connected to people who are strangers to you that you
I
feel
was gonna
like
say, can you just tease that out for our audience? Just yeah. Sorry. Can you
yeah,
just tease
okay.
that
Yeah,
term out? Yep.
parasocial relationship is where let's say you find a YouTuber that you really like. So you follow this YouTuber and they tell you about their life, they tell you about their struggles. At some
Right.
point you begin to connect with this person in your subconscious thinking, yeah, they're like your friend, right? Like they're part of your friend group.
Yes.
When
I
when
swear to
in
God, that's how I feel about Michael Jackson. Like, yes, I know what you mean. Like, I didn't even realize there's a term for it. But so thank you for enlightening us all. Go continue. Go ahead.
Exactly. So you have this parasocial relationship, but it's not healthy because you don't know this person, and this person has no obligations towards you. And one of the worst, not the worst thing, but one problem that a lot of influencers and people who work in media has with parasocial relationship
Mhm.
is that once you do something like something that is wrong or something even people perceive to be wrong, they will take it personally. They won't be like, "Oh, this person I'm watching is doing this." It's like my friend betrayed me by, let's say, working with this person or being like it's not even you have
Right.
to do
Right.
something like this person
Yes.
associate with this person. How could they, like, you would take it as like a mortal
Right.
betrayal.
Right.
So we have
Yeah. So that seems to be happening a lot
so we
in
have
this in this
the
digital era.
exactly. So we have the whole parasocial. I think also it exists in like Muslim YouTube and Muslim TikTok, right? Like because at the end of the day, being an influencer and being an internet personality, the same patterns will exist, right? Like there will be people who have parasocial relationships with imams and sheikhs, but that's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that we live in an age where you can have parasocial relationship, right? Like it's that much we connected with people. And so cognitive
Hmm.
dissonance becomes even more important for Muslim because there's more information. Like there's Wikipedia, there's YouTube, there's like it's almost difficult. Like you have to be in a in a great bubble not to see anything that's just a little bit critical of Islam, right?
Right.
And if you're part of Gen Z, that's impossible. Like if you're Gen Z, you do know that if you're Gen Z and you're just a little bit online, you do know there are non-Muslims from your community, right? Or you know that they're critics, right? Like in Europe at the very least you have like more people who are critical of Islam, right? Like in back in the
Right.
day, you know back in the day when Ayan History was coming out, there wasn't really anybody making the argument she was making, and that's because the West was unfamiliar with Islam and to some degree still is.
Yes, it
um
really is.
But now you have ex-Muslims, you have people who are critical of Islam, who's actually who studied this it and honed their arguments for years. And so you have like a Muslim youth who's coming into a world where they're getting the hard hitting Christian, like, what about Aisha? What about slavery? Um, why women treated as inferior, right? And so the cognitive dissidence has to be reinforced somewhat, right? So they have to
Mm-hmm.
like somehow believe that A and minus A are both true, right? A is obviously an affirmative, and minus A is a negative, right? But they can't obviously be true at the same time. So that's also why we talk about cognitive dissonance, because I see it. Like, to some degree, I'm
For sure.
surprised. Like, I'm
Yeah, for
surprised.
sure. I
Like,
think it's, I was just thinking of before, like, I think going back to the question of when was it in our lives where we could pinpoint, where we could,
yes, mhm.
where we became aware of, or we consciously took on conflicting beliefs. I mean, I don't know necessarily in my life if I can think back to a specific moment. Um, but what I think back to is, when I was learning Islam initially as a child, um, and this has always been my experience, it's always been kind of shrouded by a lot of violence, a lot of pressure. Um, you know, I don't ever think I necessarily accepted conflicting beliefs or ideas. I think I did it as survival. I just went into survival mode. So what I mean is I outsourced my thinking, and I allowed others to think for me because I was afraid. That's just the truth. And I was afraid of other Muslims. I was, living in Islam is like being Muslim, being a practicing Muslim for me was being in a constant state of fear. Like I had extreme um, anxiety, and that was because it was multi-layered. I had fear of the community, fear of my family, um, fear of like not even real problems, like because of honor and shame culture. Um, there's a lot of projections, like you'll be abandoned in the future, you'll be, I don't know, never married, X, Y, and Z. You've got all these fears instilled in you from a very young age to not follow this program. So later on, did that manifest as cognitive dissonance for me? Of course, like I was holding a lot of conflicting ideas, particularly in my youth. You know, growing up in Australia, my peers were drinking at young ages, and I did drink. I never ate pork, but it was something that I struggled with. Like, I drank alcohol, but then it was had a lot of guilt about it. And I had Western friends. I've always had Western friends. It's something that actually I've been consistently had conflicting beliefs on. I never
Oh my God,
gave up
yes.
my
Speak to it.
friendships.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I never gave up my friendships with my kuffar friends, and that is something that is critical. Like, as a Muslim, you're not allowed to be friends with non-Muslims, and it's completely discouraged. So you might get this woke younger generation of influencers that are going to pretend as if you can be friends with people across different cultures, but that's certainly not recommended. And any serious practicing Muslim that's worth their salt is certainly not hanging out with any kuffar, kafirs. That's just, you know. So, anyways, going back to what you were saying about the whole, where does this cognitive dissonance, like, I think for some people, they are kind of born into it, right? Like, they see, you know, especially being born and brought up in the West. Every single day, you are bombarded with ideas through TV, through media, through whatever channels that are completely different and conflict with Islam. You know, um, and so for some people, it's a natural thing. Do you know what I mean? They're able to, like, for example, I see with a lot of my relatives, they have conflicting ideas on. So for example, I know this is not something that maybe a lot of people think of, but Muslims are not allowed to consume media. Well, they shouldn't really consume media, like, especially you know of Hollywood media has got a lot of nudity, gore, horror, all these kind of things that most chefs would consider you know haram, and they are. I mean, technically, it's speaking, like most of the media content. But that doesn't stop even the most religious Muslims that I know going to the movies, and watching whatever content comes out. They're able to kind of exist. There's a lot of Muslims, especially in the diaspora, that are able to exist with these conflicting ideas. But then I would say for the few of us, it's been a lifelong struggle. Like for me, when I say lifelong struggle, I think back as a child and my child as an adolescent, as a teen, growing up, being cultivated in Islam, and it was always a point of friction. Like I feel like my own intellect was always a point of friction against my Islamic um, guardians, teachers, whatever, because I feel like most most of the disciplining I received in my adolescence and youth was came from the fact that I would want to think for myself. I had the audacity, anyways, to want to come up with my own ideas, um, or even just think over something that I heard or received from an external source, and that's not allowed. In Arabic, it's in the Quran. It's a clear verse. It says, when Islam comes, you hear and obey. Sami'na wa ta'ana. You hear and you obey. There is no such thing as you hear, you contemplate, you sit around, you talk to your lawyers, to work you through the fine print, and then you sign. No, that is not the nature of Islam. You hear the message and you straight away take the orders. So that's the vast majority of Muslims. Um, so yeah, I think cognitive dissonance is a natural byproduct of sami'na wa ta'na thinking, like hear and obey thinking. It's. I mean, what else could you add to that? Like,
I mean, you're correct, but if I have to take a dig at the question, like, what was the question? Is how did
yeah,
cognitive dissonance appear in your life? So, um, I think I don't know about you, but I had a cognitive dissonance in that I understood what the rules were and what you were supposed to do, but because
right,
I lived in the West, I had the freedom
right,
not to follow them one to one. So my
Ex-
cognitive dissidence was, yes, I know you're not supposed to, do these things, but
right,
I'm, but until the Islamic army comes, like, live your best life. And that's
right,
also,
right.
and that's not unique because that's also the same attitude I got from like two Gen Z women who are Somali, that I worked with last year, and
Okay,
we were engaging in a discussion about Islam. And at one point, one of the women said, "Yeah, I know. Obviously she didn't dress immodestly in my perspective, right? She was just wearing jeans and a hijab and just a shirt, right? But she
mm,
was like, obviously this is not modest according to the religion, and I'm like, yes, it's not modest according to the religion. But she's like, well, we live in Denmark, but if Sharia came to Denmark, obviously I will follow the program. So it's the same kind of thinking, right? Like, you know that there's a certain set of rules, but you don't follow them because you want to enjoy the freedom of not having those rules.
okay. Just speak to the. Hang on. Let's just pause and speak to the goddamn rules for a second, because I these rules that you like the rules are so extreme. Let's be honest. Who could follow it? Nobody. I feel like Islam, even the most religious Muslims, secretly resent Islam. But because there's so much, um, people think that most Muslims are scared of like Sharia and stuff. And that's true. Like most people. I mean, especially if you live in the Islamic world, and also if you come from a really conservative background, maybe on a culture, you might fear that. The vast majority of do not fear those things. It's it's more metaphysical, like not being able to go to heaven, yeah, I was going to say not being having access to a relationship with God. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just lost my train of thought, but yeah, continue, and
No, no,
it'll come
but
back to
it's
me.
it's funny. It's in a way, it's what you said earlier, right? It's sami'na wa ata'na, but just in reverse. Like they will
Well,
obey.
Donna. Yeah.
Yeah, they will
Sorry,
obey and see.
the old Arabic teacher's still in me. Can't get it out.
It's ha naya, not ha.
I know, honestly, whenever I hear like Westerners, or I don't know why African Americans or like white converts, like reading the Quran, like I feel like that the old school Egyptian or Saudi teacher that used to beat the hell out of me, the same rage comes out in me. I'm like, why are they say ha? Like I don't. Yeah, it's really
Okay.
annoying. Westerners like really butcher.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the Arabic language. It's really bad.
Well, the Arabic language is, I mean, it's difficult for Western people in general, right? Like, the thing with language
That's
is
true.
the closer connected it is to your language group, the easier it is, right? So, for example, we understand
Right.
English, like you understand English, right? So it'd be easy for you to ignorant, not easy, but
Barely, but yeah.
it'll be easier for you to understand Danish than it is for you to understand Arabic if we just looked at what language you know.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And like French and all the Latinized
So I don't
language,
really blame
absolutely.
the Western people.
No, I don't blame them. No, I don't blame them at all. No, no, I don't mean that to blame Westerners. Absolutely. I'm just saying when they're like Alhamdulillah, come on, man, it's hilarious. It's kind of funny, but
Okay,
I'm just saying
I'm gonna give you that one. It is funny sometimes
it is
watching.
hilarious. But I'm just saying it's like no, I'm not making fun of them. And anyways, why did they convert to Islam? I'm making fun of that choice. Yeah, but no, I actually don't blame African Americans or white converts and stuff like that for not or like not being able to say ha and at and ka. These are hard things to. And by the way, in Arabic, when I was young, I learned a certain, I guess Fushan, the formalized Arabic, right? Oh my
Standard
God, it's
Arabic.
completely forgot. Yeah, not standard Arabic. Forget, completely forgot the class names. Just got out of my head. But anyway, I digress. Even in Arabic, there's formal training Arabic classes. You have to learn, like, to adjust your mouth and your tongue to pronounce certain things as a young child. So I do not blame grown adults not being able to pronounce certain things. Like that's completely irrational because, yeah, like I said, you've got to be taught, formally to understand to do it correctly. That said, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's really hilarious. Like for example, I still say salami and bacon, and that comes from Westerners.
So it's funny because it's that in reverse, right? Yeah, I see and obey. Like you're supposed to see and obey on your own. But what happens a lot of times is that they will see and obey once there's an external pressure that makes them do that, right? Otherwise, just like I was, and it's very funny because there's a generational difference between us, but the thinking is the same. The thinking is,
Huh?
as long as I live in the West and I can enjoy these, fruits of freedom, I will use them. But once the Islamic army comes, who I'm supposed to agree with, then I'm gonna follow them, right? Like if I'm in a state of if I'm in a state of voluntariness, I will do what I would do when I'm living in the West. But if I'm in a state of unvoluntariness, then I'll follow the Islamic conduct. So it does tell you about their attitude towards Islamic texts and the lifestyle in general,
I,
right? Like it
I just
somewhat have to be involuntary for them to actually
Yeah,
follow
I
it.
just absolutely, and I just had a thought, and which is really scary, especially for Jewish people that live in the West and just Israelis in general. That's exactly the most Muslims' mindset when it comes to Jewish people in Israel. Like, and that's what's really scary. Like, for example, most Muslims will say, and the messed up thing is of the way social media and has kind of popularized, Palestine activism. Um, a lot of Muslims will say, I wouldn't do anything to Jewish people because, you know, the Islamic army is not here or whatever. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, there's it's not the right time. Obviously, you know, we're not ready for jihad. But the scary part is anytime these people, say when the Islamic army comes, I'm gonna be a good Muslim and I'm also gonna start killing Jews. I don't know, it always goes hand in hand. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah, I think that I mean, there's not necessarily cognitive dissonance about Jewish people, but that's a real threat. I think sometimes Westerners in general underestimate how much hatred Muslims have for non-Muslims. Like the entire Quran, at least 70% of it is Allah cursing infidels, specifically Jews, polytheists. At least 75%, probably even higher. You know, so yeah, I don't know.
So
I,
yeah,
I just think
speaking.
it's a no, no. I'm just saying. So it's a concern sometimes. I think about the violence as well too that we don't see in the West, right?
Mhm.
For example, okay, because I'm thinking back of a couple of months back to the Swedish riots, right? And the way um, somebody, the Quran was burnt by a police officer. It wasn't a police officer, a politician, right? And the whole country descended into violence for how long was it? It was a week um, of like extreme violence in Sweden. Do you want to add something to that?
Mm, I mean, so the thing with Sweden was, right? First of all, the guy who's doing it is Danish, and interestingly enough, he's a
Oh
far
no
right.
way.
What?
Okay, I didn't realize he was Danish. We
No,
didn't
he
even
was
talk about this.
Danish.
Sorry.
He's like
Keep going.
he's a Danish, Danish man who's leading a party called, literally translated to English, tight course. So
What?
he's the leader of this party called Tight Course, and he was basically going to Sweden and wanting to do a burning of the Quran in front of some, Muslim, a ghetto area where there's a lot of
Right.
Muslims. And so each
Right.
time he did it, like he would get assaulted, and the police had to help him and everything, right? And the
Okay.
thing is, this man only wanted to prove one thing, that is, Muslim cannot
Hmm.
take criticism and mockery. And the
Oh,
people
okay.
in those
Nice. Yeah.
communities did exactly that, right? Like it's pretty genius,
Hmm.
right? Like he says,
Yeah, it's pretty genuine. I didn't
and
realize that. I didn't realize he went to the hoods in Sweden and went in front of them and
he went
started to.
he went to the hoods of Sweden, and but the ones, even if he did it in central Sweden, you still get, still get attacked. It's just
Right. Right.
by doing it at the hood of Sweden, he can show the, the difference between him
Illustrate. Yeah. Yep.
and what's happening, right? And obviously, it's like it's so sad that people, fall into it. And also, the thing is, on social media, they're defending it. They're like, yeah, I don't really know what to say more to the Swedish guy, but I mean, it's so fun because he's also, in a way, breaking a cognitive dissidence. The cognitive dissidence is that Islam is the religion of peace, right? So he's showing
Right.
people by going up to these places, by burning Quran, that no, in fact, they're not the people. This is not the religion of peace. This is a religion that is in pieces. And this is a
Hmm.
religion where people who express themselves, even in distasteful ways, can literally get killed in a Western
Even
society.
that. Yeah, and exactly, and it needs to be said that what he uncovered is the violence that's brewing underneath, and it's really, and as he showed it, it's um it's bubbling quite.
It's
I can't think of
bubbling
the word right
underneath.
now, but yeah, it's quite. Yeah.
You know what's worst about the cognitive dissonance thing when
Yeah.
it comes to Muslims? It's the way they gaslight you. Like the cognitive
Hmm.
dissonance is the, the fertile ground for gaslighting you. So there was this,
Hmm.
Twitter post where the woman basically said something along the lines of, "Oh, well, ex-Muslim, they will be talking about being beaten, having trauma, and all they were asked of was to pray." Right? So she's saying, "Oh, they're talking about all this trauma that they were beaten and abused, but really, their parents only asked them to pray." That's what, that's what they're bitching about.
Oh, is
Obviously,
that who said that? Yeah. Yeah.
like she was some Muslim, some Muslim on Twitter who was
Oh, okay.
obviously
Yeah.
making a point, right? Like I don't know whether she generally believes this, but she's definitely making a mockery of what is actually a very tragic situation.
Right.
And this is one of the ways Muslims gaslight you, right? And they come from the cognitive dissidents. They can never, if they like, it's unless like if they acknowledge that what the reason you're no longer Muslim has to do with intellectual reasons, already there the house begins to crumble. But if they can make
100%. Yeah.
but if they can make people think that the reason you're here is because of emotions, and somehow
Right.
emotions are degraded, even though humans are not logical creatures. We emotional creatures that can use logic,
Right.
not the opposite around. But basically, that's how they gaslight you, right? And we see it all the time. We see that, oh, it's only your family. Oh, it must be a specific experience. And the worst thing is, oh, it's your culture. Like it's your
Oh
culture
yes,
doing
yeah.
this to you.
That's the most offensive to me. Yeah, that's the
That
most,
is the that
especially
is the
from
most
non,
offensive. Because
especially from non-black. No, I hate it when Somali people say it to me as well too. Like, or other East Africans, they'll say, "Oh, our culture." This is how much, especially from East Africa. East Africans, especially, I'm talking about East African Muslims, so Eritreans, Ethiopians. Oh my God, you know what? I'm happy to say, good news, Nubbat. I have united Ethiopia and Somalia for the first time in history.
mashallah.
Unthinkable, undoable. Yes, you know how I united them.
No.
You know how before, Somali people were like, "Don't claim Somalia, you damn Ethiopian. You know you're a shame to us." I was getting a lot of hate mail from Somalis. I want to tell people that I started receiving hate mail from Ethiopian Muslims saying, "Don't claim us." They, you know what's funny? Ironically, so the Ethiopians are now calling me. The Ethiopian Muslims are calling me the Zumali. Yeah, it's, yeah. It was really hilarious because that's my term for
Talk about
my critics.
talk about cognitive dissidence. Like they've thrown you over to the to the other
Yeah,
party.
well, who cares? That kind of done. Yeah, I was gonna say Ethiopia and Somali. I don't really, to be honest with you, I don't really care which East African. Let me include Eritrea in. We've all got the same sort of problems,
And also,
and
like Ethiopians, at the end of the day, they are next of kin to us, right? Like genetically
yeah,
speaking,
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
historically and everything.
I am Ethiopian as well too. No, listen, I am Ethiopian and Somali. It doesn't offend me. My dad's from Ethiopia, my mom's from Somalia. So believe me, I'm telling you, Kenyans could stand up and start dissing me. And it wouldn't bother me at all. I mean, I wish East Africa altogether was more successful, and
And
we
also,
weren't really concerned about,
like all these people on the internet and the different webs, they can say what they want. But at the end of the day, people
yeah.
will always recognize you as a Somali. The airport will recognize you as a Somali. The teachers will recognize you as a Somali. Like you go up,
hmm
like even the Somali community will recognize you as a Somali.
I was gonna say I identify as both, but it's the fact that they trying to police your based on Islam. First of all, Islam is a foreign religion. This is what I want to tell all the Africans. Because
Oh,
even
can I
I've
add,
even
can I
talked
add
to
one thing?
West Africans. Yeah, go on.
Not only is it a foreign religion, but it's an Arab religion. Like it's not just
Thank you
foreign;
very much.
it's not our religion. Like you,
Break
like
it down a bit further. They need to know.
they need to know
You
it's not
gotta
just
break it
foreign;
down.
it's Arab.
They need to know. It's Arab. No, no, but why is it Arab? Okay, because you can only speak to Allah in Arabic.
Let's
You can
list it.
only make prayers.
Let's list the thing, right? First of all, the book is in Arab. The history is in Arab. The country you're praying to is in Arab. The people listed in the history are Arab. Like you're nowhere to be
hmm
found. Like the only other race of people to be found are Jews,
and
and that's in the
and we're not
old.
given any
That's in the
credibility.
old text, and it's also
Yeah.
that's also one of the greatest. Like forget about Islamic feminism. That's put that to side. Like no, like Islamic universalism is really what's bullshit over here. They're like, oh, it's a universal religion. It's like no, this is Arab history.
No, it's
Like
not.
that is
No,
and
it's not. And it's a
inherently,
premise.
yes, exactly right. Like it's that's actually one of the things that bothers me the most because it's so obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
Like what language are you praying in? What language are you studying this religion in?
Right. People talk about white supremacy all the time, but I don't even know white supremacy. I know Arab supremacy. I'm familiar with that. My name is Arabic. I was taught Arabic as a child.
Well,
I
my
was
name's
in
Arabic too.
like, and not only that, we all of us, all of our names are Arabic. You know what I mean? Like But what I'm trying to say is, I'm just trying to, for our never Muslim audience, our entire culture is pretty much, it's at the same, it's identical to, you know, Islamic Arab culture. We've been erased thanks to Arab supremacy. Like that is the number one. Like when I see, especially black, like just different types of black Muslims, um, kind of spewing that Islam is, a multicultural religion or their religion of their ancestors. I'm like, are these people? Do these people? The cognitive dissonance on the black Muslims part is they believe that somehow they're equal to Arabs. That's cognitive dissonance. Because let me tell you right now, these Arabs are laughing, and they will probably tell them straight to their face. You know what I mean? I think you're an Abid, which is a slave. I don't consider you equal to an Arab. That's how Arabs look at it. And that's fine. I'm fine with Arabs having this nasty attitude. I just wish they would keep their religion and localize it within the Middle East. You know what I mean? Like,
If
take it away from
only.
Africa, erase it from Africa. We don't want it. I don't care.
And put
Yeah, I
Christianity in
just,
that group too. Like honestly,
yes,
Abrahamic religion, leave
yes.
Africa alone.
African, yeah, exactly. We don't need Abrahamic religion. We don't need it. We already have issues with religion anyway in
Mhm.
Africa. Like, for example, bad beliefs, animism. Like, there's all these other problematic beliefs that we need to evolve out of. Like, I feel like Africans and spirituality needs to be null and void in the future. Like, in order for us to prosper and advance, we need technology, not spirituality. You know,
Exactly.
um,
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for
yeah.
listening to this episode. We hope to see you next time.